Hey, Professor James, so much uncertainty in the job market for so many reasons. Seems like these are really challenging times for both job seekers and employers.
Yeah, the parameters of early career employment seem to be going through some pretty significant shifts lately, not to mention the tens of thousands of people who have recently been sacked and are going to have to dust off their resumes and or do some significant upskilling. So are these challenging times? That's putting it mildly, Jeff. I'd say it's more of a big what the effer.
Welcome to Job Ready. I'm Jeff, the Purpose Guy.
And I'm Charlie, the entrepreneur.
And I am Professor James.
Hey, Jeff, we have some awesome guests in the studio with us today that can speak with great intelligence about the topic. Why don't you introduce our guest on this for this episode, please?
Absolutely. It's most definitely my pleasure to introduce Scott Moore, the Global Head of University Recruiting at Marvell Technology. Prior roles include Director of University Recruiting, Member Experience at Veris Insights, Senior Manager of Early Talent Recruiting at Zillow, and Senior Manager of University Recruiting at Gap, where responsibilities included leading various recruitment initiatives for multiple brands. Scott's experience also encompasses serving as Inclusion and Diversity Manager and Manager for Campus Recruiting at KPMG US, and extensive roles at the AICPA, including Director of Student and Professional Pathways. Guys, Scott is as experienced as anybody I've ever talked to in terms of early career and recruiting. And with Scott, we're also so grateful to have the crucial talent perspective of Roland Simmons. He's an electrical engineering student at the University of Louisiana Lafayette, and he's worked as a hardware engineer as well as an infrastructure engineer in Marvell Technology's internship program during the summers of 23 and 24. Gentlemen, welcome to Job Ready. So glad to have you on the show.
Yeah, thank you very much for having us here.
It's our pleasure, and we appreciate your perspective so much. I mean, Scott, let's start out with you. For all intents and purposes, to us, you are a black belt early career talent sensei at Marvell. So let's start out grounding our audience in your philosophy and your approach to early career.
Sure. So the general philosophy, and these are companies that I've always worked for and strive to continue to look for. We think of the philosophy behind early career from a couple of different perspectives. One, when most people think about early career, they also tie it together with internships, right? And companies have different perspective on internships, but my philosophy and the companies I've worked for's philosophy is always to utilize an internship program to generate your full-time hires of new graduates, right? So really building that pipeline of new grads coming into an organization to help fulfill your long-term leadership goals, right? You want to bring in people, early in their careers, nurture them, train them, mentor them, so that they can become future leaders of your company. And that internship program is a wonderful gateway for people to get in, test the waters of a profession, test the waters of a company, make sure it's somewhere that they want to spend, not maybe their whole career, but at least a good chunk of it. Because that first job out of college is really, really important to set the tone for the rest of your career.
Absolutely. It sets the tone for the rest of your career. It sets you up for life, right? And I think, Roland, it's good to come to you and say, can you tell us your mindset to set the stage for how Marvell created an environment that made you say, yeah, that's where I want to dedicate myself to their work, set myself up for the rest of my career, right? You've been in two roles as an intern there.
Right. And the thing that I loved about when I got to Marvell is that each team that you're on, they handle their interns how they want to handle their interns. So what I liked about my experience was they treated me like a new hire that first summer. So there was like, we're not going to give you a project and let you sit in a cubicle all summer long. So you're going to shadow this engineer. He's going to teach you how things go in infrastructure, so deploying stuff, and then, we'll assign you tickets. And at first I was kind of nervous because, prior to having an internship, all I heard was, your project. And what my team was like, we're not giving you a project. We want you to get a real experience and that's what I really liked. So that like helped me once I got into my second internship with Marvell, because they treated me the same way. I was just with a different team. And what I was doing my first summer was supporting that team my second summer. So I knew, like, the first summer I was like, who am I deploying this server for? And then the second summer, I'm the one that, using the server. And so I think that, it gave me a ground up approach, like, oh, okay, this is how things go. But the approach by team is different. But I like that with Marvell, because some interns may want a project. They probably don't want to be out there and feel responsible. But me, I was just like, no, I seen the good and the bad of the industry. So like working the way the team brought me in, and I enjoy it. It's a great opportunity.
Hey, Roland, walk us through this a little bit. It's been a while since I've get out of school. Let's just say it's been just a little bit. It's a very different environment to be in the school, in the academic environment, right? Where you're more or less being told what class you have to show up in by timeline and all that good stuff. To go from that academic environment where it's highly structured to a work environment where you have to be more proactive. You have to be more. You have to lean in a little bit, I guess. So, kind of walk us through your experience and what you've done to acclimate into the new environment.
So me, it's kind of like I'm a cheat code, because I came from the working environment and I went back to school and then I got an internship. So that, like, bridging the two, or like disconnecting the two, like school, academia, and industry, wasn't really difficult for me. So like, I was always a self-starter. So I was very transparent with both of my managers every year, even the director, because I found out he had the final say so if I come back or not. So the transparency, across board. But like, you got to be hungry. You can't just like, I noticed in school, right? If a professor assigns anything, regardless of how hard it is, down the line there's an answer. And if he sees you're, fighting at it and trying to figure it out, and then he'll be like, okay, look, you were close, but here's the answer. Now in industry, there isn't always an answer. Like, you might. So I had that problem last summer, but I would say, just being willing to learn, but also like, self-starting, like, okay, I know what we do, let me look into this. Just being curious really helps a lot in an internship, because if you just sit on your hands and do exactly what your manager tells you, and you don't try to go to the beyond, or you don't tell them you're interested in other things, you're kind of like selling yourself short, especially at Marvell, where our company has so much to offer. It's just like, even if you were assigned a project, or with me, I wasn't assigned a project, but if I seen someone else in the lab working on something that I was interested in, yeah, I'm definitely gonna go walk over there and say what you're doing. So I would say curiosity,
Wow.
and just, willing to learn
Yeah.
would really help in, distinguish academia from the industry. So if you're very curious, your coworkers, they see that, and that carries a lot of weight.
I'll add just a little bit to that question too, if you don't mind. I think um, when a student is looking for an internship and they're interviewing, or for a full-time job even, right? These are the types of questions that you want to ask your potential manager, right? Is like, how does work get assigned? How can I find stretch projects, right? And if your potential manager is very ready to answer that question and answers it smoothly, they've already thought about this ahead of time, right? If they say, well, you're going to get this one project and I want you to be heads down on that forever, that might not be the right company for you to pursue, right? So
Right.
you always get an opportunity during an interview to ask questions at the end, and that's a great question to bring up to make sure you're going into the environment that you really want to be in.
Hey,
Yeah, that
Scott, can
is
I
true.
clarify with you? I mean, and Roland too. I thought I've heard that this is your second internship with Marvell, right? Is that correct,
Yes.
Roland?
Mhm.
Yes.
And Scott, from Marvell's point of view, is there intentionality to have multiple internships with the same individual, or Roland, is an anomaly in that sense?
I wouldn't quite call him an anomaly, but it's not the norm either. Now, this varies from company to company as well. So, one of the things that we have to be really aware of, and just to piggyback on some of the things that Roland said as well, is our interns get embedded into a team and they're working on our customers' projects, our client deliverables, right? Well, to bring somebody in, say, the summer after their freshman year of university, they're not going to be able to contribute that much because they probably haven't taken any courses in their major yet, right? So if I were to put a student at that point in their educational career into an internship like Roland had, they would really, really struggle. And the team would also struggle, right? So some internships that are more project based tend to be geared towards students earlier in their academic career. Our internships are not like that. Our internships, we treat you almost like a new grad, new hire, put you into a team, make you work on some of the more advanced things, right? So that puts us into a situation where we tend to bring in students later in their academic career. Now, if they've taken coursework and maybe they're a little bit ahead, right? So let's say that they're a sophomore, but they've taken coursework that's typically at the junior level. That's somebody we might consider bringing in for 2 consecutive summers, right? Or our PhD interns, for example, like we could bring them in for 3 summers in a row because a PhD program is typically 5 years. They're going to have a lot of knowledge that they contribute to the organization. But, some companies do lean a little bit more on that project based. Other companies do lean a little bit more into like, we're going to try to simulate what your full-time job would be when you graduate as much as we can. And that's the approach and philosophy that we take.
Wow. So Scott, for a guy like Roland who was already working, and who obviously has a sophisticated perspective because he got in there and wanted to get productive, I mean, we all want to work with people who are curious, like that kind of drives you through the day, right? So, what kind of blend is there between the let's give you the experience and have you start contributing value because we want to hire people who want to do the work, who want to who enjoy this and get through with it. What kind of blend is there with onboarding or more of the kind of overview of the organization, preparatory sort of tactics with somebody who wants to get in there and start doing work? How do you balance that?
I'm going to answer half the question. I'm going to flip it to Roland for the second
Great.
half. So we as an onboarding team, everybody that joins, and this is pretty standard across most company, everybody that joins, whether you're an intern or you're an executive, your first day of onboarding is pretty much the same. You don't get much variation, right? Day 2 and day 3 tends to be still structured onboarding from, HR driven. And we do some specific stuff just for interns. We do some specific stuff just for new grads, right? So that stuff we typically tailor more towards, your basics. Here's the benefits, how to sign up for them. Here's your computer. Here's how to log in. We get through all that stuff, right? Then you get to team specific. And that's where I think the onboarding piece becomes more about your relationship with your manager, your relationship with your specific team. And that's where I'm going to flip things over to Roland to talk about maybe your first couple weeks here and how that onboarding was very different than what my team typically puts together.
Right. So, like, to piggyback off of what Scott was saying, it is kind of like that. Like, there's an onboarding, like, through HR, but there's your team onboarding. And my first summer and my second summer, for the main part, because I didn't, I had friends tell me that I had internships. You're going to get a project. You're going to get a project. You got to finish it by the end of the summer. So I just had that in my mind. And when my team decision, which really I thought it was my manager's decision, but I found out this summer it was the director's decision overall. The way that they handled me as an intern was, we're not giving him a project. We're going to bring him on like he's a new hire, let him shadow some people. We'll assign him a few things and we'll see how it goes from there. And from me being transparent with him, like a part of the onboarding, and I tell everybody this even before I came back to school, when I was getting hired, I would ask, how's your onboarding? Because me personally, I'm as good as your best trainer. So if your trainer's trash, there's a good chance that I'll be trash. But if he's a great trainer, then there's a great chance that I'll be a great employee. And the guy that I was shadowing the first summer, I mean, he as wit as a fox, and he would train me. He would train me, and he would question me and like make sure I'm paying attention. And he'll be like, you understand this, because I wasn't a note taker. I'm like, let me see, let me go through it hands on. Other people, like another guy that trained under him, he was like, you ain't taking no notes. I'm like, now I kind of want to figure it out, like, visually and physically. And the dude was like, you sure you're taking notes? I'm like, I get it. So he was like, because next time we get a ticket like this, it's all on you. Like, I'm not helping you. So I'm like, okay. And then, but the way he was training me and like making sure I understood things, when it came for me to actually do something on my own or get confident to like take a ticket from another person on the team, he would be there like just spectating, making sure I didn't, break a server. But he was like, I'll be like, I had the student side of me like, this right? And he's like, I don't know. Like, and so, I'll be like, well, we're going to keep going. And then he'll tap me and be like, it's okay. Like you're doing it right. Just joking around. So, but it was a great learning tactic, but he really prepared me, and I brought a lot of that back to academia, but it really goes on. Like, that's what I tell people, as good as your trainer is, that's how good, that candidate or that employee, that intern would be. But like, I got so confident that first summer, I think my manager at the end of the summer said, I planned on assigning you, I think it was 5 tickets throughout the summer. Like, I was just letting you learn. And I think he looked at the jar and I had like 30 tickets done. He said, you pulled 25 more.
Yeah.
But that was just me like, oh, I could do that job. I'm not going to, I'm just taking people tickets. So that was just me being hungry. But the onboarding was literally like up to the team. And, I found out this summer that was the main game. Like, they want you to be curious, but also go after it. So, 5 tickets turn into 30 in 3 months. It was all on me, and my manager was like, yeah, I didn't even plan on giving you that much work. But, and this past summer, I don't even know how many overtime hours I had. I got to pay back taxes. Let's just say that.
Well,
Yeah.
and just to build on a little bit of what Roland said too, just to kind of echo how he shows his curiosity, right? So in his coursework at school, he had barely dabbled in Linux a little bit. And I was talking to Roland during his first summer, and I said, Roland, how are you doing? Or how are you learning? He's like, well, I didn't really know Linux at all, but we provide access to Udemy to all of our employees. And he's like, so I went on Udemy and I taught myself Linux, right? So that's the kind of curiosity that you try to, really exemplify as an intern. That's going to lead to that full-time job. But that thirst for knowledge, and I don't think Roland's alone in that, right? But like when you don't know something, figure it out, go learn it. Professor James had a question.
Yeah. Thank you. I didn't mean to interrupt, but I just wanted to, take advantage of the fact that Scott and Roland, from your multiple and then synchronous perspectives, academia uh, has a certain overall reputation for doing things in a way that's maybe been around for a while, compared with the speed of business and innovation out there outside of the walls of academia. What do you feel, are each of you, that universities ought to be doing more of, if there is anything, in the 21st century, given that AI and other types of, let's just say, technology broadly presented, not just in one field of computer science, but in other fields, to prepare humans to where they have skills that will be complementary to any emerging technology, but also give the humans that sort of curiosity on the long term and a willingness and a usefulness in industry. So, I mean, from the experience you had, Roland, you little unique that you were in industry, came back to academia, then went back. But what is your feeling if you were to have a little wand that could change some of the ways that students got prepared? And then, Scott, maybe from your perspective.
I would say, from an academia standpoint, there's, especially at Marvell. So I don't know too many universities out there teaching what's going on behind those lab doors. But I would say on the university side, like reach out. Like of course, Marvell's not going to tell you exactly what they're doing, but they would give you a heads up on like, we look for these type of students, so they need to know these type of classes or be familiar with this type of hardware, et cetera, et cetera. So I would think on the academia side, I think the universities, because I mean, I'm at a school right now where we have a teacher. I don't think he stopped teaching the way he taught in like 27 years. So, and it's kind of hard, especially me being like I graduated in May, and so I'm sitting in the class and I'm like, bro, what are we doing? Like, I know what go on in the industry, and I'm like, I understand I gotta pass this test, but what are we doing? Because I feel like especially professors, they get in this complacency where they're just stuck in their way. It's rinse and repeat. I'm gonna teach the same chapters. I'm gonna teach the same thing, and it's like students do want to be challenged, But if you let a student get complacent, also, I mean, why not? Why not sit back and how his test's gonna be? How he teaches. He's a hard grader. But like, why not challenge the students? Because in the end, that's what you want better students. I don't want to keep producing the same you know candidates. I want my next class to be better than my last class. So I would think, on the academia level, that's something that they could do. They could reach out to industry. Some schools are like, I was at a conference this past week, and some of the kids' resume I seen, I was like, what? Like, they do that at y'all school? So yeah, Scott, you can follow.
Yeah, I think it's important for professors to always be students at the same time. And I think, Roland's situation is kind of an extreme example of that, of, his professors and his university had the opportunity to learn from him in two different occasions, right? So he went out and interned, came back for a full year, right? How many of those professors do you think went to Roland and say, hey, what were you doing during your internship? What did you learn that we're not teaching at school? And then they got a whole nother summer of Roland going out and doing that same thing again, right? So I think the feedback loop from the intern back to the professors is not nearly as strong as it should be. And students aren't viewed as much as, experts in the industry per se, but they learned so much during that time during their internship that the academics could really craft some of their curriculum around what the interns are actually doing while they're out in the workforce.
Not surprised one bit to hear that. Roland, to your point, I mean, I've talked to a dean of a very large institution, and some of the content curriculum hasn't been updated
Right.
for some time.
Right.
And but to their defense, I mean, is when you're an accredited institution, you don't get to change things on a dime. I mean, because there's certain requirements that you have to go through.
Right.
Scott, I want to take this conversation slightly in a different direction here a little bit. I mean, as hearing you guys talk through kind of the company requirements as well as kind of the team specific requirement, made me think of the cultural component, right? So at an organization, you got the organizational culture, and then in the individual team, you got its own culture, right? So for you out there sourcing, screening, and hiring future talent for your company, for Marvell, but also for the team, because they have specific hiring needs. How do you accommodate for the nuances in the cultural differences?
Sure, that's a good question. So I've been in a few global roles, and one of the things that I've become even more probably tuned into is, culture from one country to another country within the same company, right? And just, cultures are different when you cross over country lines. And, if you're going from Asia to South America to North America, even within the same company, you're going to have different cultures, and then you break that and roll that into different teams. So it becomes even more complex. I think the first thing that we try to do is get the student or the candidate in front of people on that team as quickly as possible, right? Our recruiting team has a culture in itself, right? Whether I have recruiters all over the world, and we have a culture that may be different than even what the teams have or the engineers have, for example, right? So I try to get my recruiters out of the way as quickly as possible. I mean, we're here to be guides, we're here to be coaches, we're here to, help move the process through. But ultimately, when you hire somebody like a Roland, he's not going to work for the recruiter. He's going to work on that team, right? So our job is to be involved just as much as we need to, but not any more than that. Because we really want the candidate to get exposed to the culture of that team really, really quickly. I think the other important piece of it is like how many people are they meeting within that team as well, right? Some companies have a very short, truncated interview experience where they meet one or maybe two people. I don't, and let's say they're 30 minutes or even an hour long. Like, can you really get a good vibe on a culture from talking to two people for an hour each? You can pick up some of it, right? But I'd much rather have them meet with four people and you get a much better perspective on what the culture is going to be then. You can't obviously meet everybody. Like we don't want to, put together a 6-hour interview panel. That's not realistic
Don't do
either,
that.
right? But can
Don't
you
do
get
that.
them in front of four, right? And maybe it's 30 minutes each for three people and an hour long with the manager. But, the more time you can get with those folks, the better understanding you're going to have of their culture. And also, you're going to have a better understanding of what kind of culture that the candidate's looking for too.
Right.
Yeah, and the internship, the length of the internship would definitely help, with that, right?
Yeah,
Provide a
12 weeks.
much more.
You're gonna know the culture really well after 12 weeks.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. They're gonna know
Yeah,
you
yeah.
real
Hey,
well
Roland,
too.
I'd love to get your perspective on that because I think
I would
your
say
case is a little unique because you've been in the workforce before. Yeah,
right.
but what's
And
your take on that?
so I've been in a workforce that's culturally is bad. So when I got to Marvell, it was just a breath of fresh air. I think I remember, I don't know if it was the third day my first summer or it was that first week though. Scott's head guy, I call him Sean. Sean. He I was telling him like everyone I met, it was just a nice like vibe. And I'm like, I text him, I say, okay, y'all can stop the front now. Like, I'm here now. But it was just culturally like motivating because I come from the South where your work culture is like, you don't want to be at work, you don't want to be around this person that much long. So I'm here to do my time and I'm on I-9 by 9. So when I got to Marvell, I was telling people, I'm like, I never woke up in the morning, regardless of one summer I stayed in Oakland and one summer I stayed in South San Jose, that like, oh man, I gotta go to work today. But that was because of the culture. Like, yes, I love doing what I love doing, but like the first day I like on the internship, my manager came get me at lunch and he was like, we're going to lunch. Like, we're gonna meet everybody after lunch, but we're going to lunch. And then he said, I'll just invite everybody to lunch. So it's like that's a great approach. Like everybody open up when they got food at the table, so you kind of see texting you, things. And but the culture there is just it's really what like I'm still here. That's the reason why I'm still here. But it's really a big thing because that makes or break, you know, uh your decision on do I want to work there? Like, okay, yeah, they got this and that, but it's like, do I like working with the people that I'm with? And there at especially at the Santa Clara location, the culture is just so great to the point where it's just like I can't beat it. Like, I don't see myself anywhere else because of the team and the people I like working with. But it's like I was texting Scott earlier this week and I was like, I had to work with his team in the IND team this past week. And I'm like, it's a Marvell thing. Like the culture is just great across the board. They had people from sales, they had people from the Austin team, IND, Sean, the whole. And I told Scott, I said, this is like a big family. Like, I'm the technical side. These people are usually vetting candidates, but the culture, it was just transparent across all phases, every team. So it was real great. And that make a break. I know from a perspective, I have friends that go on internships, and they'll be like, dude, it's a okay job, but I don't like the culture there. So
Yeah, Scott, what's really interesting in today's world is you're seeing the softening of the labor market, right? I mean, I think in one of our previous conversations, Scott, you shared that there's quite a bit of applications for open positions. But within the advanced manufacturing and semiconductor industry, I gotta imagine. I mean, that's pretty hot. It's pretty competitive at the moment, right? I mean, how are you? What are you doing if without spilling any kind of secret to kind of help Marvell get in front of the best candidates possible to differentiate? I mean, the company and gain competitive advantage.
Sure, sure. Yeah, you're right. The labor market is tightening up a little bit, but within our industry, it's definitely super competitive, and there's a lot of opportunity here. And it's not just ours, but I mean, still within like a lot of STEM degrees, it's still like that, right? So we haven't talked much about AI, but I think this is a good point to bring it up a little bit. Where there's some, I'll say, deceiving statistics out there, because of what AI is opened up capabilities for people. I think the biggest thing is it's easier to apply to a job today than it ever has been, and a lot of that is AI driven, right? So what that does is it creates this sense of, well, I applied for 1,000 jobs in the past month, and I haven't gotten anything back, right? Well, you go back 15 years ago, you could never fathom applying for 1,000 jobs in the month. It just would not be possible, right? Like you could stay up 24 hours a day and never get that many applications out, right? So the fact that the application numbers are so high, I think it makes people feel, unfortunately, like a little bit emotionally drained, because like, well, I put my foot forward for so many things and I didn't get one, right? You also have to think about, well, how much effort did you put into all 1,000 of those? It couldn't have been much, right? So you kind of get what, what's it, you reap what you sow, right? So, I think one thing that I really encourage people to do is, take your time, put forth a little bit more effort, because to answer your question, we as recruiters can see that, right? We don't use any AI to go through our applicant pool, right? We still do it. I don't want to say we don't use filters or things like that, but we don't use AI. And we can tell how much energy you put into applying, right? And people that put in a higher level of energy and really try to engage are the ones that we notice and the ones that rise to the top, right? So, if we don't, but if a company makes, gives you an option to write a cover letter, and it's an option, write a cover letter and put some time into writing it. Like, we notice that kind of thing, right? Don't have one resume that you use for all 1,000 places you apply to, right? I don't want to say you should customize it completely for everyone, but you should have maybe 5 different resumes for 5 different types of jobs that you're applying for that really highlight the skills needed for that one, right? Like, we can kind of sniff through if you're just, taking a shotgun approach and applying to thousands of things at a time. And that doesn't look as good as somebody that put forth, that extra half an hour of effort to do a little bit of customization.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel like you have to differentiate and compete for some of the best talent, from your competitors, Scott, or you feel like because the job market's a little soft, where that's not as sensitive as it used to be?
No, there's definitely still competition. I think the competition, it's kind of evolved a little bit, especially for early career, where, especially within our industry, there's only so many universities that teach the curriculum that we need, right? So I think there's like 2,000 universities in the US. We're probably 200, maybe 300 of them even teach what we need the students to learn, right? So we can narrow things down pretty quickly based on the curriculum, but that creates a lot of competition. So what we do is we try to engage with the top talent as much as we can. Roland mentioned he was at a conference last week. It was the National Society of Black Engineers, right? The best engineers from the country are at this conference. So we go to meet them where they are. So we get our branding out there. We get wonderful people like Roland and the rest of the team to talk to the prospective candidates. So we kind of take a little bit of an old school approach and actually go out in person. And we go to universities. We did over 300 events at universities this year in person, to try to generate the relationship and make sure people are thinking about Marvell. Whether we're meeting with students, whether we're meeting with professors, we're getting into classrooms, we're integrating with student clubs, like just the virtual website and outreach through emails and that kind of stuff. Everybody does that. That doesn't set you apart. I think that the getting back in person and that kind of post-COVID, personal interaction that people are looking for, That's, I think, what's our differentiator right now, and that's how we, I think, attract a lot of the top talent.
Thanks, Scott, for giving us a really good and broad overview of the way that Marvell works and the way that you uh, still have those values of human relationships compared with the mass generated approach. Roland, in closing, what would you recommend for students or people that want to get into the workplace now in terms of how you find and work with recruiters? I mean, you've had some really good experience that you've shared with us, but do you have anything that they might not have been prepared for in school that you would like to recommend to those in our audience that might be, on the student side, just about ready to go out there and change the world?
I would say, and Scott could vouch for it because that's the only reason I'm at Marvell now. So I knew coming back, I didn't have any experience in my industry. This is for any major out there, and like from if you like if even if you're in the early things, like Scott said, make a difference or make an effort. Because my perspective was I'm going to apply for this position, and I thought they had an algorithm behind the scenes. Oh, they don't got nothing dealing with the job description, right? Because my resume was completely different, and it's gonna kick me out. So I'm like, I probably got 48 hours before I get kicked out. So after I would do the resume, what I did was I'll go on the not the resume. I did my resume after I would do the application. What I'll do is I'll go on LinkedIn and I'll sort the company by people and type in University Recruiter. And that's how I found Scott. And I sent them a message saying, hey, look, I'm real interested. I know I got 48 hours. I ain't telling him all that, but in my head, I'm like, I got 48 hours before your system boots me. And, like he said, if you're showing you're interested in a position, you know, he reached back and he was like, I'm gonna have someone talk to you. And Sean contact me. And not only that, I know at Marvell we do a great job. Sean contacted me and was like, hey, I'm gonna give you a call and tell you how to set up your resume because you're coming from a different perspective of the students. So you might have to put some relevant coursework, but he gave me a little resume review and told me how to rework it. And then from there, he told me, hey, look, it's late in the recruiting season. I can't promise you nothing, but your resume is good now, and not just, for Marvell, but he was saying for your future. It wasn't just about, working at Marvell. He gave me that call and he gave me a resume review for my benefit. And he say, but I will shop your resume around if something pops up late. Thank God something popped up late. But I would say most definitely, if you want to show that extra effort, and I know they probably have some recruiters that just probably have to have a LinkedIn because that's a part of their job. But that was my approach. Like if I was really interested in the job, I'm going to apply and I'm going to reach out to the person that's probably over hiring that position. I'm going to find you on LinkedIn and I'm going to reach out, So instead of, like Scott said, doing 1,000 and just sitting there, maybe you could have did 100 and reached out to 25 people, and then you probably would have got,
Mm-hmm.
5 back. So I would say that would be
Mm-hmm.
my approach, like take every avenue you can.
Great
That's a
advice,
huge
Roland.
compliment to you, Scott. I mean, this to hear you taking the time to provide the feedback and really, because I think a lot of recruiters we talk to, they kind of they become jaded. I mean, because the volume that they have to deal with, right? And but for you to take the time and provide the feedback and provide the personal touch, I mean, I think speaks volume about Marvell's culture and reputation as an employer. Not too often we have somebody like Roland on, to talk about and on the topic of AI. Professor James, I have to squeeze in one more question for Roland. So if I have to buy you a drink later, so be it. But
Okay,
you
I got
know,
witnesses.
Roland, I mean, AI is we talk. One of the things that we talk very often on the Job Ready podcast is you got to AI up if you want to be competitive, if you want to have more opportunity to land a full time job or even for advancement, right? Can
Right.
you talk to us a little bit about how AI usage in your day to day, or if you have a view on that, and just anything you can share how AI can impact your opportunity.
I would say so. I'm old school, so I kind of hate it. But I mean, it's a tool. That's how I look at it. And I'm in academia where I have several of my classmates where they may utilize it, but it's not to their benefit. Like and I'm guilty of utilizing it, but I utilize it to my benefit. It's like I don't need the answer. I need you to probably like explain it to me like layman's term, because engineering gets up there high level and it's like, okay, like, can you simplify this into like, so a 5-year-old can understand it so I could get a better grasp. But I would say you do have to know, it. And I kind of talked my first manager, that was my question to him. I say, with tech, the way it's moving, people that worked in this industry, I was like, do you think that it's going too fast? I always ask people that. And he was like, I do. He said, I've been in this industry for so long that, I've seen resumes. He was a manager. He used to hire. And he was like, I've seen resumes alter every, new tech. So he was like, a couple summers ago, everybody was a cloud expert, And he said, I can promise you next summer, everybody will be an AI expert. And he was like, it's getting to the point where something new will come out, and it will come out so fast and people will jump ship that we haven't fully learned the last thing that just came out. We haven't fully learned cloud, but AI is the next thing, and that's what the industry is moving towards. So it's like, let me jump ship. So I would say with AI, like, yes, you have to be AI ready. You have to have it in your arsenal. But as far as like, the way, I think it boils down to the way you're using it. Are you using it for shortcuts? Or are you actually using it to help you learn? Like, and that's the way I use it. It's like, okay, this is not working. Why? I don't be like, oh, fix it. So that's my perspective on it. And, I kind of like feel like my manager, like, people are jumping ship when, a new tech come out. Whatever going to be next after AI, people going to jump ship to that. But will we fully learn the potential of AI if another technology keeps coming out? And, that's the way we're moving.
Wow. Well, thank you, Roland, and thank you, Scott. I mean, it's inspiring to us when we hear curious and dedicated engineer meeting a really wonderful, intentional early career expert, and then coming into a team where people aren't numbers. That's the bottom line, and that's the best. Thanks so much. I know our audience is going to love hearing from you both in today's episode. On behalf of Job Ready, this is Jeff, the Purpose Guy.
Charlie, the entrepreneur.
And I remain Professor James.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Roland. Appreciate you coming on and sharing your insights and experience with us, and also to our loyal and growing audience for joining us today.
Yeah, as ever, big gratitude and respect to all of you listening. Job Ready is an employer-funded financial aid podcast. You can visit us on the EFFA site at effa.io/all one word, Job Ready. EFFA helps employers source, vet, and prepare university talent.
Folks, well, thank you once again, and that's a wrap. And we are EFFA, over and out.